All right, looks like we're live. Welcome everybody to the e-commerce accounting 101 webinar. What you need to know to set up proper accounting workflows in QuickBooks when using Shopify, Amazon, eBay, and other major e-commerce platforms. I promise you this is the most important webinar you will ever attend if you're planning to do any sort of integration between an e-commerce platform and QuickBooks. And the reason why I say that is because 100% of the clients that I get, new clients that work with e-commerce, whether they had an accountant or not, if they connected using the built-in connection for Shopify, Amazon, eBay, or any e-commerce platform into QuickBooks, the accounting is always a hot mess. And I think it's because they never really stop to think and plan how they want the data to come in. How are they going to plan the workflow based on how they want to see the data in the reports, or how the accountant is going to reconcile the information. So we're going to talk about all that. And Webgility is a third-party app that's one of my favorites to integrate the e-commerce platforms, but it basically creates a middleman approach to bring in the data, but let you choose how the data comes into QuickBooks so it can be customizable to how you want the data to come in, because you don't just want the data to dump into QuickBooks. You want to control how the data comes in based on the outcomes that you want to achieve. Then we'll spend about 10 minutes talking about fundamentals. So we're going to put everybody sort of on the same level, same page. We're going to talk about fundamentals of e-commerce accounting. And then we'll spend 45 minutes in depth doing the demo in Webgility. We have John from Webgility in the background that's going to jump right in when I'm done doing this piece. Now, really quick before we dive in, let me share with you why I think Webgility stands out. If you're running an e-commerce business, you probably know there's a few free and basic connectors, but they only go so far. They often create errors and force you to spend hours fixing your books. This is where Webgility is different. It gives you real-time bookkeeping, better inventory tracking, and detailed customer-level financial reports. And the best part is, it works really well whether you're starting out with a simple Shopify account or you're managing a full multi-channel operation. That combination of power and ease of use is why so many businesses and accountants rely on it. So let's start with the items that you need to think prior to doing any type of integration with or accounting integration with e-commerce, and think about every one of these things as their own major decision that you have to make. The first one is, do you want to track individual transactions inside QuickBooks, or do you want to bring in a summary of the transaction? So the pros and cons is, if I bring the individual transactions, I'll be able to run reports in the individual transaction level. Now, there's decisions to make on whether or not every single sale itself comes in as a separate invoice or a sales receipt. And then we'll discuss whether it's one or the other. By the way, that's an interesting distinction. Or do you want all the sales for the day to come in a single invoice or sales receipt? Of course, you lose the customer information, but you retain the line item information. The other piece, when we talk about accruals, for example, do you want the transaction date to be based on the day the customer ordered? Or do you want the transaction date in QuickBooks, if you're downloading individual transactions, do you want it to be based on the ship date? Or do you want it is some sort of manual date based on when you decide to bring it into QuickBooks? So you want to make the decision right up front, because it's going to fundamentally change how the sales are being reported, especially if you have sales in December that you don't ship until January. So the big question is, do we recognize the sale in December? Do we recognize it in January? That's going to be up to you, based on how you plan for this workflow. The next major question is, do you want the individual items, like the individual products and services being sold, do you want them inside QuickBooks? And if so, do you want them to come in as individual non-inventory items so that you can track sales by item? Or do you want them to come in with generic item names where you don't have a distinction, like an item report? Like you can see the item in the description, but you can't run sales by item inside QuickBooks, right? So you have to make that decision. And then the major big decision is, do you want to track inventory in QuickBooks? Therefore, do you want the sales to be downloaded with the individual inventory items, matching the inventory items, so you can track inventory, cost of goods sold, et cetera, in QuickBooks? It's a major decision you have to make up front. The next one is, particularly if you're bringing individual separate transactions, do you want every single customer to be created as a separate customer inside QuickBooks? Or do you want it to use a generic customer name, something like Shopify customer, but in the name and address field, have that individually loaded on each transaction? So even though you cannot track sales by customer, you could look at any individual sale and see who the customer is. So you have to make that major decision up front. And the last one in this category is, do you need to track accounts receivable? So most e-commerce people pay you, and then after they pay you, you ship the product. Simple, right? But it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes we do B2B or wholesale through e-commerce. And even in Shopify, there's an option, right? Especially the Shopify Plus, the e-commerce, the B2B edition, you have the option to have user ID and passwords where your wholesale customers, your business-to-business customers, log in, place orders, and they don't put a credit card, they don't pay. And if that's the case, you're probably going to be tracking accounts receivable in QuickBooks, and you're probably going to be sending them a statement at the end of the month, and you're probably going to get one lump sum payment to pay off all those individual sales, individual shipments that were done through the e-commerce platform. So if you need to do that, you need to change the way the data comes in, and you cannot use sales receipts. You have to use invoice and payments as two separate transactions, because some of your transactions will come with payments and some will come without payments. That's a big major decision to make, right? And again, if you don't need any of that, then the best thing is to have all the transactions come in as sales receipts. That way you don't double up on invoice and payments if there's never a separation between the sale and the payment itself. Now, let's move on to order management logistics. Another important area of decision is, do you want all the transactions to automatically post into QuickBooks indiscriminately? Or do you want a manual process where you can choose what gets posted into QuickBooks after a certain condition is met, right? So after you verify payment, or after you make sure you confirm the order or the address, after you ship it, or whatever it is, right? So many e-commerce merchants wait until some manual process happens, and then they recognize the sale, and then they send the information to QuickBooks. And if you're going to automate any of it, assuming you are going to automate, like not have a manual process for posting, then you want to decide, do I want this to happen daily, weekly, every hour? So you want to make that decision, because that could change your workflow. The next piece here is shipping. Like in the e-commerce world, almost always there's shipping, with the exception of digital products, of course, but physical shipping of boxes and products. So sometimes people will use an integrated app like ShipStation or Shipping Easy, so the order comes in and automatically sends it to the ship manager, and the ship manager prints the label. So are you going to use an app like that? Something to think about. Or are you going to manually go into FedEx.com or whatever and print a label? So you want to think about that, because if you are going to use an app, you want to start looking at apps that talk to not just the e-commerce platform, but possibly that talk to the accounting platform or the middleware, such as Webgility. So if you are waiting for that label to be printed before posting, you want to make sure that integration is there. These are the sort of the trivial ones, but they do matter, and they do affect accounting quite a bit, especially reconciling clearing accounts. Is discounts, refunds, and fees, right? In the real world, not everything is simple and easy, right? There are discounts, there are adjustments, there's refunds, there's chargebacks, there's not just shipping fees, but transaction fees, credit card fees. So how do you want to manage those? Okay, so let's start with discounts. So how do you want to manage discounts? So there's actually two trains of thought here. One is, if you sell anything at a discount, do you want the discount to be allocated through all the products in the sale, and the sale show the net price on the invoice for each individual item, and no separate line item for a discount? Or do you want to see a complete separate line item for discount? And the difference is, you're going to sacrifice something. So if you have a line item on discount, then you'll be able to see your P&L, your gross sales, and a line for discount, but you won't know what products or product categories are getting discounted. And if you go the other way, if you allocate the discount and reduce the price of the product, You will get proper gross profit per product on every transaction, but you won't know how much was gross sale versus discount. So that's a major decision you kind of have to make upfront. The next one is transaction fee. So there's actually two trains of thoughts on this too. Do you want the transaction fee to be inside the invoice or the sales receipt and be netted from the sale? So that way, when you look at every sale, you're not looking at the actual amount the customer paid. You're only looking at the amount you're getting paid. Now, that's good for knowing your profitability per invoice. But the problem is it's a little bit harder to reconcile that way. So I actually like to see transaction fees separate. I won't be able to see a net profit per transaction or per invoice, but I'll be able to see it by customer because you can allocate that by customer, but you won't see it at the invoice level. And generally, it's not that important to know your profitability per invoice. So from that planning stage, I generally like to separate them, but you have the option to have it be net of the net amount of the invoice. And lastly, refunds. Now, refunds should just be tracked like orders, right? It should be a negative order, so to speak. The problem is that when you issue a refund, there are some merchants have manual processes, like I won't refund until I physically get the product, or I'll tentatively refund, but then I'm waiting for the product, and then I won't reverse the refund until I verify that the product has been refunded. So there's all sorts of like manual processes that go through refunds, but for accounting purposes, how do you want to track those? So generally, they should come in as a negative order, so to speak. And some people say, you know what? My refunds are so little, I don't even want to track them. I just want them to come in as net of sales. But the problem is that reporting won't give you, the big picture. Okay, so it's that inventory workflow and that accounting workflow. Do you want to see sales and refunds as two separate lines in your P&L, or do you want to see your sales net of refunds? Again, another big question to ask yourself for planning. The next one is sales tax. Now, with Amazon, typically that's not a problem. Amazon handles sales tax for you. But in Shopify, Shopify will be configured to charge sales tax in whichever states that you have Nexus in. But then the big question is, are you going to handle your sales tax reporting through Shopify? So are you going to log into Shopify, pull the reports, and then do your taxes from there? Or are you going to do it in QuickBooks? So if you're going to do it in QuickBooks, you have to make sure that, especially if you have multiple channels, that all the channels bring the data through the QuickBooks sales system, or using sales tax items in QuickBooks, so you can run custom reports and have a consolidated sales tax report. Because if you use your platform to handle sales tax and you have more than one platform, more than one channel, or more than one store, you have to consolidate the data. So that's going to be a pain in the butt. Or are you planning to use a third-party app like Avalara, that can help you manage multi-channel, multi-state, that sort of thing? So that's a big decision you have to make up front. The next one is chart of accounts planning. So generally, you want to think whether or not you're going to be using balance sheet transactions so you can accrue money movements. So a lot of people skip balance sheet transactions and they only do P&L, which means they wait until the money hits the bank. And whatever net money hits the bank, that's what gets recorded, and that's it. A lot of people go that route. I know it's simple. The problem is it doesn't give you the big picture. It doesn't give you accruals. So any point in time that an order is made, there's money movement that doesn't necessarily hit your bank immediately, right? There's clearing accounts. Some payments get 2 or 3 days to process. Sometimes there's refunds. Sometimes there's holdbacks. Sometimes the merchant is the credit card merchant system that you have is holding money or require you to have some retainage in there because you're growing too fast, that sort of thing. So there's money movements that tell the full picture beyond the money that hits the bank. And if you want to be able to you want to track any of that, you have to use your balance sheet. You have to use your clearing accounts, and you have to be able to have a separate clearing account for each of these payment gateways that you have. And particularly if you have multiple payment gateways, let's say you're receiving money through PayPal, Stripe, Shopify payments, Amazon Pay, that sort of thing. Each of these payment gateways have to be a separate clearing account on the balance sheet and has to be reconciled separately, which is why e-commerce accounting is not so easy. Now, when you pick what payment gateways your store is going to use, for example, Amazon just uses Amazon. Okay, so then you don't have to worry about that. Amazon always uses their own payment gateway, and then they'll pay you within every 2 weeks, right? That's how Amazon does it. When you use platforms like Shopify, there's a lot of different payment gateways you could choose from, right? So if you're in the US, you can only use Shopify payments, but if you're outside the US, you're probably gonna have to use something like Stripe. There's something called Amazon Pay, which is a payment gateway that has nothing to do with Amazon, the store, which handles the payments for you. There's PayPal, there's Authorize.net. There's actually tons of payment gateways you can use to make it easier for your customer to pay. And if you do that, remember, every payment gateway is its own clearing account. So that's its own sort of tricky situation. And there's also something called buy now, pay later. Gateways like Klarna, Affirm, ZipPay, Afterpay, where they give the customer the flexibility to not have to pay 100% in full. They pay like a layaway programs, kind of like a loan, like a short-term loan. And some of these gateways give you the option to either pay you as the customer pays you. So you'll be shipping an order in December, but you might not get paid fully until June, and you have to track the fact that this money is coming, that you're expecting it. Or some of these gateways allow you to get the money up front, but they take a pretty deep settlement fee up front, and you want to be able to track that to understand, whether or not you, even though you're enabled buy now, pay later, are you truly being profitable? Because these fees are pretty deep. I mean, like they really cut into your margins. And in the e-commerce world, margins are so tight that sometimes this buy now, pay later doesn't really pay. So something to think about. And so, and there's a lot more to discuss. I mean, there's inventory, which is a whole nother ball game. Hopefully, I'll get to discuss that more with John when we talk about Webgility. But the big question is, can QuickBooks by itself manage all this automatically? And the answer is a resounding no. QuickBooks does have a connector to Shopify, Amazon, and eBay, and it can download those transactions with a certain level of detail. But in my experience, it just falls short if you want to customize any of the workflow. And in my opinion, QuickBooks brought this sort of beta concept and really hasn't completed it. I just feel that it just hasn't been completed. And this internal platform they have is just very, very, it just has a lot of shortcomings. So I always recommend using a real e-commerce connector like Webgility, the sponsor of this webinar, or Cinder, or A2X, or Bookkeep. I don't mind mentioning all the competitors. There's more than one. But of course, we're going to go deep into Webgility so you can understand how good that is, because they are laser focused on solving these issues for e-commerce. They're not trying to do everything for everybody. These apps are just solving for e-commerce. So QuickBooks Online built-in e-commerce features, as I've said, they fall short. Let's just be specific where. Number one, you can only connect one Shopify store. So if you have multiple Shopify stores, that won't work. It does have a connector to Amazon, to Etsy, to eBay, only single stores. All the orders come in with a generic customer, so you don't have the option to have each separate customer come in as its own separate customer. All orders come with a generic item, so you also don't have the option to map your items to track inventory, and you cannot work with more than one clearing account. So it assumes that every one of these platforms have a single clearing account. So for that reason, I strongly recommend that you pay close attention to the next 45 minutes or so, where John from Webgility is going to jump right in. So here's John from Webgility to do a demo. We'll skip all introductions.
Perfect.
Let's jump right to the demo.
Okay, so yeah, just to kind of jump into how Webgility works, how to get started. When you first log in at my.webgility.com, it'll take you to the dashboard. Obviously, if you haven't set anything up before or it's a new account, you're not going to have any information here. But you'll be taken to this connection section here at the bottom left. This is where you'll get started, connect your QuickBooks and your sales channels. In this case, we have a Shopify already connected to Webgility, and I've already connected QuickBooks. The process for connecting new channels, or the accounting platform or the payment gateway is all very straightforward. You just click the button and it gives you a list of the options. I will go through the process of just really quickly connecting another Shopify account. So I'm going to click Shopify from the dropdown. And then from here, you'll put in your store name. So I'm going to paste that in here and then click next if the time zone looks right. And so this, again, very similar across whether you're connecting a store or a QuickBooks. It's going to bring up a pop-up for you, usually to log in to either that store's admin panel or your Intuit account.
And John, if you happen to have multiple Shopify accounts
Hmm.
or multiple stores that you want to connect through Webgility into QuickBooks Online, you can do that, right? It's not just one.
Absolutely, yeah. So right now I have two Shopifys, but that could easily be a Shopify and an Etsy or a Shopify and an Amazon. The only limitation is based on how many, sales channels you have added to your account. By default, you get two, but you can always add more if you're, scaling or you already have multiple stores. So perfect. So you'll get a confirmation message showing that it's connected. And then from there, you don't have to do this, but it's always a good idea to go into your preferences for your stores and just make sure you're happy with what is listed here. Your download order starter date might be relevant if you're, maybe only looking to pull in data from a specific date. Like maybe you start your subscription right after the year starts and you want to pull from the first of the year.
And John,
Um,
and that you have a little drop-down menu that says preferred accounting method
yep.
transactional.
Uh,
So can you break down that difference? And this is part of what I talked about in the beginning of the
yeah.
presentation, where I can explain the differences. But tell us from Webgility standpoint how this is different.
Yeah, so this will allude to it a little bit, but the difference between transactional and summary is really the fidelity of the information that you're getting. So if you're going with a transactional accounting method, that means you're pulling every transaction in individually and all the order details that come in from that transaction. Really good if you're looking to get fine detail on all of your orders so that you can understand from a profitability standpoint or just from like a data integrity standpoint, like having all the information that you can get. Whereas summary would be sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's going to pull everything into essentially a batch. It's not going to track inventory. It's just going to be the order totals. So if you have a super high volume of orders, a lot of people at a certain threshold will just switch over to summary so that they can not have to worry about the minutia or those fine details.
I think it depends on how you're running your business, right? So
Yeah.
if you are running a business in which you want to see transactional data in QuickBooks, and
Hmm.
even within transactional data, there's a whole bunch of multiple options, which I really like, which we'll get into in a little bit. But you might want to see your sales by customer or sales by channel or sales by product
Hmm.
in QuickBooks consolidated across all your e-commerce, right? Because each of the individual e-commerce sites, be it Amazon, eBay, Etsy, Shopify, Walmart, whatever it is, they give you pretty good reports. I mean, they're not all easy to pull up. Sometimes they're like spreadsheets and you have to
Yeah.
pivot tables and crazy stuff. But most of the time, the data can be accessed separately, individually in each of the channels. I think the key to this is the reason why you're bringing the transactional data across all the channels is because you could have individual information across the different channels that can be related and they can be dimensioned and grouped, like a
Hmm.
particular product type or a particular region or a particular um, category of products. So that's why I mean, I know we talked about this in the introduction, but that's why you make this decision and not do summary. And also
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
a product settings. What do you have in there? What are the options in there?
Yeah, so that's actually the very next step right after you connect your stores is to go in and a lot of times when we set up new accounts, we offer a free onboarding session to get everything set up. And that's what our onboarding team will do. They'll take you through and help you sort of configure things to your liking. So yeah, going to the order settings themselves, first you'll be asked to just make sure that your chart of accounts is essentially set up the way that you want. You'll do a little bit more mapping going forward after this tab, but this is this initial setup to make sure that your payment gateways and your clearing accounts for those are set up correctly. So if you maybe don't want to use the same clearing account for refunds or fees, you can select a specific account for each of these orders, refunds, and fees.
Yeah, and thank you to alluding to that because we talked about that, the clearing accounts during the introduction of this.
Hmm.
Um, you could have a single e-commerce platform like Shopify have multiple clearing accounts, right? Because you may have, their Shopify payment gateway, or you may be using Stripe as an option, or you may be using this thing called Link and Google Pay and Apple Pay and PayPal and I forget the name of the ones that where you could pay in parts where you can pay like sort of like a
Oh
layaway
yeah,
plan.
Klarna
Yeah,
and yeah, yeah,
Klarna and
yeah.
stuff like that. So every merchant makes their own decisions on what payment gateways they enable so they can make it easier for the customer to transact. But it
Mhm.
doesn't make it much easier for the accounting if all the transactions get lump sum into one place. So being able to control which clearing accounts in QuickBooks, in your chart of accounts in QuickBooks, is attached to which channel is a huge help, right? Because then you can reconcile each of them individually, look at the reports each individually, and if there's an error in one of them, it doesn't stop you from reconciling, all the other ones. So I actually like this a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, that's like a pretty common theme for, just everything that we have in Webgility is that we give you the flexibility to set things up to be that segmented, right? So you can go with summary or, journal entry posting to keep things really simple if you want and make things sort of in buckets as you will. But you can also go a little bit deeper, create clearing accounts for everything, not just for orders, refunds, or fees, but just for all the data that comes in through WebGility period can go into its own essential little partition.
And John, I do want to go back to the settings because there's a lot of
Mhm.
stuff and wisdom that you learn through this. But like for the people that I kind of want to see, like what do the orders look like? Can you show me like
Yeah,
what the sales look like once they're downloaded from Shopify or Amazon and how that flows into QuickBooks?
definitely. So for the to access orders or refunds because they're treated very similarly, go to sales and then orders at the top left, and it's just gonna pull in any new orders that it sees. Good thing about WebGility Online is it should automatically pull in any new orders into the WebGility interface. By default, it's not going to automatically post them until you basically tell us that that's what you want us to do. But it'll at least pull in the orders so that you can see them here. So this is the orders screen. You can filter by any new orders that haven't been posted, any orders with updates. Maybe we downloaded an order before and posted it, and then there's an update to that order that needs to be pushed to accounting again. That is something that happens frequently. Errors, so any orders that maybe you try to post and the items may be missing in QuickBooks. Any like strictly posted orders will just go to the posted tab, and then you can choose to ignore or delete orders as well, just to keep them sort of out of the way.
And I do see that there's a little Shopify logo on the right. So this would be a
Mhm.
consolidated place where all your orders across all your e-commerce stores are showing, but you can filter them, right? You can like, let's just look at Amazon
Absolutely.
or just look at Shopify. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So you could so if you have in the I guess in the scenario where you have a Shopify account and there's multiple stores for that Shopify, you can filter the stores under that Shopify account directly from here. So right now the Shopify account only has the one, but you can also like we talked about if you have multiple stores connected, you can swap between the two and see your orders at a glance for that store there as well. So there's a bunch of ways that you can look at your orders. Beyond just filtering within that store. But you can also filter by, I know Shopify has their B2B Plus offering. If you have Shopify B2B Plus and the B2B add-on through Agility, you can actually filter and kind of sort your orders by DTC and B2B orders. So if you're kind of doing both at the same time, you have the flexibility to look at one or the other and not have them all sort of commingle, if that makes sense.
Okay. And this screen is not meant for you to make any changes to the transactions or anything like that. This is kind of like
Correct.
this is triage, right? So the stuff comes from Shopify, and before it gets pushed into QuickBooks as a transaction, you have the choice to either push it or not. Do you have a setting where you can push them automatically without you having to review them first, or you always have to triage
Absolutely.
here?
So you can set up, we have at the very bottom left here, you'll see our automation tool. The automation tool allows you to set it either nightly or every 15 minutes. And generally that's the last step, right? For obvious reasons, we don't recommend, turning on automation until you're comfortable with how the information has flowed. So when we get back to the settings, I'll show you all the little, I like to call them levers and knobs that you can turn that essentially mold WebGility to your workflow and the information that gets pulled from Shopify.
Yeah, I have some clients. I don't know if you've had this experience that they'll have the order here and they won't sync it into QuickBooks after they have shipped it. So they kind of use this as
Yes.
quasi ship manager,
Yes.
even though you can also connect to and we can maybe talk about that too. You can connect to the automatic ship label printing systems and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I have some clients that do manual kind of ship label printing, and they use this as their dashboard to know what needs to be shipped and what hasn't, what doesn't need to be
Yeah.
shipped.
And the cool thing is you can set Webgility so that they don't post to accounting until, so you still have that automation. You don't have to manually click, post to QuickBooks or anything, but you can set it so that once they have shipped, then it automatically posts for you. So,
Now, if I need to inspect that transaction in Shopify, how do I do that from this screen?
so you mentioned that Shopify icon in the order row. You can just click directly on that icon, and it'll take you directly to the order in Shopify.
Oh, that's great.
Um, yeah. Additionally, and I gotta exit full screen here to go back. Additionally, you can, once the order's been posted, and I'll just show one that's already been posted. So you can see here that paid, posted to QuickBooks. I can click on QuickBooks or Shopify here. And if I click on
Now,
QuickBooks,
John, quickly, before you open it in QuickBooks, could you just show how a transaction is manually posted and then just kind of open it right after?
so let's just do a new order, post to QuickBooks. Okay, so we can see the orders posted. You can click the little button to show it posted, and I think this was void. But yeah, so you can see it shows unpaid, so this wouldn't be an order we would probably want to pull into QuickBooks, but just to show you, clicking the QuickBooks icon here will take you directly into the sales receipt for that order. So you can see $69. And then, like I mentioned, when we look at the posting settings, you can sort of decide what gets pulled into these fields here. Some of the fields are very easy for us to, change the information that gets put into them. So if you want like memo information or anything like that in the message or change some of the way that we look at these date fields, that's definitely possible. But yeah, this is what it looks like when you post it directly from Webgility.
And
So it saves you the time of having to go in and fill all this information
yeah,
manually,
of
right?
course, you don't want to duplicate that out. I think, and then most people don't. They don't go into QuickBooks and they duplicate that information,
Hmm.
and that's why they do some version of the summary
Yeah.
because they just don't see the possibility of having this data flow.
Yeah, nobody would want to have to go in and enter all this information individually. So yeah, if you're getting the cliff notes on your transactions, you're probably missing some vital information, right?
Now, John, quick question. Go back into WebGilly really quick.
Hmm.
And we want to get out of the weeds of the whole paid and unpaid status just because most merchants, um, all the orders are always paid. Like just
Yeah.
by default,
Yeah.
they require a payment in order to process the order.
Yeah.
But it's good that you show that because one of the settings in Shopify is to allow people to process that order even without paying. Okay,
Hmm.
maybe because you're gonna charge them in their wholesale account, or maybe you have some other, cash on
Yeah,
delivery
like net
or
30,
whatever.
net 15,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
exactly. Now, question on that: could you set up the unpaid transactions to come in as invoices instead of sales receipts?
Definitely. Yeah.
Can you show me that setting?
Absolutely. So let me go into, this is where we left off, right? At the chart of accounts. The very next tab is the orders tab. So this is where, as I mentioned, you can configure for sales receipts, you can configure the fields that pull up on them, but you can also, instead of doing sales receipts, set them as invoices. And you get a similar set of options to set your transactions. So when they pull in as invoices, you have all these options to kind of fine tune the way that the data pulls into WebGility. So yeah, like we don't have to go through every one of these options, but you can set your payment terms here, like we talked about, net 15, net 30, if you want to pull it in from QuickBooks or use the defaults that are in this case Shopify, you can do that. And then you get things like setting the invoice date. I know you mentioned some people wait until it's shipped to really process it, so that's where you would put maybe just the shipping date for your invoice date, and then likewise the setting the ship date. You can change that memo to a couple of different options. And then yeah, some miscellaneous stuff. Towards the bottom, you'll see some more advanced settings. A lot of the times, these little radio buttons are sort of hidden at the bottom because they're not used very often. But that just goes to show that we have a lot of sort of individuality or flexibility for people's workflows. So
Yeah, and can you go up a little bit? You have this little checkbox that says record payments. So when
yes.
you click that checkbox on, I just want to add some clarification to this, is if you choose to bring transactions as invoice instead of sales receipts, then the payment and the transaction or the invoice will come in as two separate things. So let's say, for example, 90% of your transactions are paid immediately. You will have 90% of the invoices and 90% of the payments, and anything that hasn't been paid stays open, so you can manage that receivable from the QuickBooks side, right? Because you wouldn't be managing the
Yes.
receivable on the Shopify side. Now, Amazon's different because Amazon's always paid. It's a whole different ballgame. But
Hmm.
Amazon's everything should always come in as a sales receipt. But what's really neat about this is if you have a timing difference between when the order is made and when the payment is made, you have that information, that rich accrual-based information in your
Yes.
accounting system. So if you do cash basis accounting and you don't want to report any of the sales that were posted in December because you don't get paid in January or whatever, you have that total flexibility there.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said it really well there. I mean, the flexibility for the data that gets pulled in allows you to not have to change your workflows around to make sure that the numbers match or make sense.
Now, I did
And
one thing I
uh
did see that the invoice date could be order date, ship date. What was the other option?
or the
Order
date
date,
of
ship date,
posting.
or the posting. Okay,
So when you go to post it, it'll stamp the date as
the
the
date
date that
the
it's
day that you
posted.
decided to bring it into QuickBooks.
Correct.
Now, if you go by shipping date, where does it get the shipping date from? Like, where does it pull that data from?
Shipping date would be put in on the order through Shopify.
So whatever Shopify has as a ship date.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you are using Shopify that's integrated with some ship management
ShipStation,
system,
Shipping Easy. Yeah.
okay, and so when the shipping date gets changed afterwards, that's an update to an order, and that's what updated orders means, where it goes back and changes the ship
Exactly.
date afterwards. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, either that or, the number totals, something gets added to the order, stuff like that. But yeah, the shipping date is a really good example of that.
Okay, now let's talk about the big thing, which is product names, SKU numbers. I
Yeah.
have my own database in QuickBooks of what the products are called, but in Shopify, they're called different. In Amazon, they're called different. How do you solve that problem?
Yeah, that's actually like I would say probably the biggest problem that we run into when we bring people on through our onboarding. I actually started as an implementation specialist at Webgility, so I have a really intimate knowledge of this. But you get people that have 20,000 products and either no SKUs or just like a really bad SKU process, at least on the Shopify end. On QuickBooks, you have to have an item number or a product name, right? That's just it's built in. But on Shopify, it's a little different, right? Like you don't have to put a SKU in. So the biggest thing that we like to stress is that for Webgility or for any system that you use to know uh, that one product in your Shopify matches another product in QuickBooks, we need a key identifier. And SKU is generally the thing that we recommend, right? So in Shopify, you have a SKU for every single one of your products. And then if you have that same SKU on the QuickBooks end and you match it to the SKU field, that works. Otherwise, match it to the product name. And if those two, names or numbers match on both ends, then Webgility knows 100% those are the same product. That's how any syncing happens, how order postings happen. So there's like an ecosystem that Webgility fits into here. So we'll see the SKU on Shopify, we'll pull in that order, and then when we post the order, we'll check to see if that SKU exists in QuickBooks. And then if it does and we find the item, then it adjusts the inventory by whatever was in the order. So that it starts that sort of life cycle.
Okay, we're gonna unpack this a little bit because as I mentioned in my introduction, the SKU matching and item matching is probably the biggest challenge, especially in a
Mhm.
multi-channel setting. So what you're referring to here is the automation, the matching, right? It's if we haven't done an explicit map,
Mhm.
then my product name in QuickBooks has a name, and then my SKU in Shopify has a SKU number or a code or a name, and
Mhm.
use that to match it, or maybe the two products name match. And if neither the product name or the SKU, if neither one matches, then there's another mapping mechanism that we're gonna get to in a second. But
Yes.
an interesting thing, which is a second layer to this, which is it's possible that we get started with Webgility and we don't want to go through the whole mapping mechanism, or maybe we don't have we've never done the homework of creating the products in QuickBooks. You
Mhm.
can set up that if it doesn't match, either give you an error or just, you know what, create the darn product for me, right? So
Yeah.
that's what the next thing says. So can you walk us through that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, everything that you're seeing here is really based on that order pulling and posting process. So we'll pull the orders. We can see the orders on Shopify whether they exist on either end or not, right? So we can see your orders in Shopify, and then when we go to post them in QuickBooks, whether it's automatic or manual, if you're clicking that button like we did, you can have it set up if that product is not found. So if we look in the order and we say that sweater that's in Shopify that has, whatever SKU number, if we can't find that SKU or don't know where that product exists inside of QuickBooks, it's going to default to whatever you select here. So creating a new item in QuickBooks, like you mentioned, is really good for those times where you maybe just set up a new company file. You haven't done the homework, you haven't done the process of having everything created in QuickBooks. That just gets it right out the door so that you can go in, and you'll probably still want to obviously go in and adjust the item inside of QuickBooks to make sure that you have all the fidelity that you need. But then you have other options too. You can have it error out, like we mentioned. There's that error tab in the order section. You can have it use a standard item if it's something that maybe you don't track inventory on. If it's an item that you're not like too concerned about having the exact order information on, and then you can also give it the option to match it manually. And I can show you that process here in a second as well. But that just allows you to say, hey, this item in Shopify and this item in QuickBooks, you do a manual search on both ends, they're the same, and then from then on we'll recognize that they're the same item so that you don't have to do that again.
Yeah, I would love to see that process because um you can set it up to give you an error. That means it's not going to post, right?
Mhm.
It requires human intervention to look at it, read it. Or you can say, you know what, have it manually match, which is sort of an error, but it's an error that's queued directly into just the matching process. So
Yeah.
that one's really interesting because I find that to be one of the most common cases, especially for people getting started, where the entire product list and from QuickBooks, the product catalog in QuickBooks versus whatever they have in their e-commerce channels don't match. So show us that process because
Yeah.
I find that to be really useful.
Yeah, so the product catalog up here at the top left, this will take you to anything product related under the product section. The product catalog itself is where we're talking about that matching, mapping, sort of mismatch situation. So it's a little bit to take in at first because there's all these tabs at the top and they all sort of have similar names, but just to break it down, missing in QuickBooks would mean it exists on Shopify or whatever store that you're in, whatever sales channel you're using. It exists in that store, but we cannot find the SKU that you have listed in Shopify. We can't find it in QuickBooks, so we don't know where it should go.
Like
Missing in
it's not
Shopify,
exact. It's not exact match. It doesn't mean it
correct.
doesn't mean it's missing. It means
Correct.
it doesn't have an exact match.
Yeah. Webgility just doesn't know where it exists. So it could exist in the system and we don't know how to find it essentially. So from here you would select whatever the QuickBooks product name is, or if there's a SKU that matches it, you can select it here. You're seeing no options found because we do also have this sort of fuzzy matching technology behind the scenes where something might not match right away, but we think that it might be a decent match for it. But yeah, so for instance, if you wanted to match it to, it might not find, there we go. So I don't think this is the same item, but just to kind of explain it, you have your abstract print button down maxi dress, and then you can find it by product name or again using the product SKU function in QuickBooks as well.
Okay, and,
And
and
then
that and that learns, so to speak. So it's like once it's set up,
mhm.
next time this product shows up, it will automatically go there on the Shopify side,
Yep.
and you
So
have
I'll
to do
just
it
I'll
again
click
in the
one
other
here just so you
channels.
can see the functionality of it. So for these, it already has sort of this matched idea that it has, and I'm gonna hit confirm match. And so now you'll see that manual match tab up here at the top has one option in here. And so this will track everything that you've made that bridge yourself, right? You've mapped it manually. Anything that you do will go into this section so that you can keep track of it. So if maybe you do it incorrectly or at some point you do set up a correct SKU or something like that and need to remap it, you can just hit this unmatch button as well, and it'll go right back to not knowing where it exists.
Okay, so that's the item matching. Now let's
Mhm.
talk about the concept of inventory versus non-inventory. Okay, that could be
Mhm.
useful for us. So what are the let's start with, and I talked about this in the beginning, but I'll ask you from your perspective. What are the advantages of making the items non-inventory versus inventory from your perspective?
I mean, I think making something non-inventory, it's really product dependent sometimes. I mean, sometimes you don't need inventory for like digital items, but making something non-inventory means that you'll never have to, worry about a stock out in your store. You'll never have to worry about the adjustment of inventory on either side. Those are the biggest ones that at least are impacted by Webgility. Is there anything specific that you wanted to dive into on that though?
Yeah, that was the segue to get into like now the advantages of using
Yeah.
inventory. You nailed it, right? So we may not be tracking cost of goods sold per transaction, or we might not be doing purchases of individual items, or we may not be doing inventory adjustments every so often in QuickBooks. That might be a choice that we make as accountants and business owners. So then in that case, I'm just going to make everything non-inventory, even though there are inventoriable products. And there's
Yep.
also all the products that are non-inventoriable, like services, digital products. But then there's a huge advantage, which is you are using inventory items. So you can use QuickBooks to track inventory, but you can also use your QuickBooks inventory to inform your stores whether
Yes.
or not something's available for sale, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's that ecosystem that I was talking about, right? So on one end, you have the orders that get built in from Shopify or whatever store, and it has that quantity that's in the order, and whatever quantity is in the order that we then post to QuickBooks deducts the quantity from your QuickBooks inventory. And so from there, if you make inventory changes, you get a shipment or something like that, and update your QuickBooks, then we can push that update back to your Shopify or whatever store it is. There's a couple ways you can do that. Just like with everything, there's sort of the halfway manual sort of way. It's still a lot faster than going into all of your stores and updating it. And then there's the fully automated way, just like with the orders. But this is a good example here. So if you go to the inventory section under the products, you can see, obviously not a very realistic scenario, but you can see we have this Hanes t-shirt. And in QuickBooks, it says that we have, what is that? 2,999,000.
Yeah,
And 99,000.
yeah, a big
And then,
number.
yeah. And then in Shopify, we have -5.
Right.
Obviously, not
So
realistic numbers,
Shopify
but
wouldn't let you sell it right now because it hasn't been
correct.
synced yet.
Yes. So
Now,
in your Shopify, it would be showing that it's not available.
is there auto syncing or you have to do sync each time?
So there is auto sync. It's again sort of that last option that we recommend. Once everything is set up, once the flow of information is exactly how you want it, then you can turn it on so that it syncs again either every night or every 15 minutes to make sure that that loop is continuous. But to start out when we're testing, or if you're just like trying to test the functionality, you would sync directly through here. And when you click the sync button, it'll actually ask you which side is the source of truth. So when you set up the automation, you'll always have the same source of truth. It's not going to ask you when you set up the automation every time wouldn't make sense. But when you're doing it manually, you can use maybe, again, in the case that you're setting up your company file for the first time and you want to push information into QuickBooks, you could set your store as the source of truth. But generally, we recommend QuickBooks up for obvious reasons. So,
Oh, so if your store shows inventory in stock and your QuickBooks doesn't or has a different number
mhm.
and you sync back, it makes the adjustment in QuickBooks?
Correct.
Oh,
Yep.
that's
So
cool.
it'll push whatever update is on the Shopify side if you're using Shopify as the source of truth, and then QuickBooks. You're seeing an additional option here to sync negative quantity as 0. Obviously, that doesn't work from the store to QuickBooks because QuickBooks can't have negative quantity. But if you set it from QuickBooks to store, makes sense because we have -5 in Shopify, so we can sync it, and it will no longer be -5. Now it's going to show, the 2,999,000. So,
Exactly. No, that makes sense. Now you have a price and a cost column up there. So on
mhm.
the price, this is the price that shows up in the store or the price that shows up in QuickBooks when you go in here? Or
It's
both?
both.
Both.
So
Okay.
just like the inventory, so this is going to show you both sides. It's going to say, hey, we've got something showing up as $14.23 in QuickBooks, whereas your Shopify has it differently. Now that could be part of your strategy. You could have something built in so that they should be different. Maybe you're selling things for a little above margin on your Shopify or your Amazon compared to what it's listed as in QuickBooks. But if it is something that you want to adjust, you can either sync manually or you can ignore certain products so that they don't get automatically synced through that automation tool. Because I know if you have those certain situations where you do want it to be a little out of sync or asynchronous, you maybe don't want to automatically push those updates. So there's
And,
some flexibility there too.
and that's the only part that Webgility does to serve as a listing manager, just the pricing, right? Because you're not gonna be able to change the picture of the product or the description of the
Correct.
product through
We have
just
some
the price.
very niche applications. A good example is like in our desktop version of Webgility. If you're using QuickBooks Point of Sale, we actually can upload listing photos and descriptions and stuff, but it's specifically to QuickBooks POS. So yeah, as far as like a listing service goes, the inventory, the cost, and the price are as far as we go. It's more of an updating than anything.
And if you go to the cost column, the purpose
Mhm.
for that would be so if your channel does any sort of cost calculations or reporting,
Mhm.
then you will move that over there. But it doesn't really, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your cost doesn't matter to your channel, because your channel, you don't do
Correct.
anything with
So
cost.
if you're maybe if you're putting information into your channel that you want to push over to QuickBooks, I could see that being a thing. But yeah, most people it would just you just have it in QuickBooks. You don't have to worry about it anywhere else.
Okay, and last one, what does multi-channel sync do? What are the options there?
Good question. So multi-channel sync allows you to, in the case of having multiple stores like we do here, you see you have Gilly products and Shopify 2, you'll select your master inventory. So that means that you have one sales channel that you want all of the inventory to sync from, basically.
Okay, because
Uh,
QuickBooks doesn't let you manage inventory in multiple locations, so
correct.
so you need to have a single location for
So
all your
yeah,
inventory.
just like we did in the that product mapping section that I showed earlier, you'll select the criteria, so SKU name, item title, and then once you hit continue, every hour it's going to sync your non-master and your master inventory.
All right, cool. So we've covered the chart of accounts configuration, all the different type of orders that you can bring in, how products work. Now, here's the other one that e-commerce people think about deeply, which is, what about my customer data? How much of the customer data should I bring in, and what
Mhm.
options does it give you?
Yeah, I mean, I think customer data, just like order data, is it may be a good idea to bring in as much information as you can get. And it works really similarly in WebGility to the way that we look at products, because you have to find that key identifier. You have to match customers between systems, right? So by default, we give you the option to match by first name, last name to customer name and accounting, and then there's sort of like this fallback that if it can't find it, it'll search by email. Outside of that, though, you can also use a standard customer. Really helpful for things like Amazon, where customer data doesn't really get pulled in accurately, anyways. Um, so you could set it, if this were an Amazon, you could set it as a standard customer and then name a standard customer in QuickBooks as just Amazon customer. So everything comes through to Amazon. Um, Outside of that, you can, again, sort of similarly to the product matching, you can have it automatically use a new standard customer if it can't find it, or create a new customer. Just like with the products, if it can't find something, you can have it just create it for you in QuickBooks. You'll get some additional options based on how you want their address to pull through and update inside of QuickBooks. And then finally, I know I've sort of mentioned or alluded to our capabilities with B2B. This is also kind of enhanced in that you can pull in B2B orders and match the company on Shopify B2B specifically into the customer name or the parent and sub customer if you have that set up in QuickBooks. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's common to find, services that are geared specifically towards wholesale or B2B and specifically towards retailers. But there's a lot of, in between area there for people that do both. And I think this satisfies that pretty well, in my opinion. So,
And I'm sure you have a lot of customers that don't sync any customer data. They bring in every single transaction, but they don't even bring a customer name. What happens? Does it just come with like Shopify customer? Like what happens? Like,
yeah, it'll come through whatever is listed on the order. And generally, in that case, we recommend rather than having it create new customers, if you don't care about tracking it, then we would just say use a standard customer, set it as Shopify customer, and then all of it'll go straight to Shopify customer. That way, if you have maybe you have multiple Shopify stores, you have Shopify 1, Shopify 2, whatever the names are, or an Amazon and a Shopify, that way you can, at least keep them in their own buckets without it just flooding your QuickBooks with useless information that you're not going to use.
perfect. Now, I see that discounts, refunds, fees,
Mhm.
sales tax, they kind of have their own tabs, okay? Just because each of them have their own world. Can you kind
Mhm.
of go through like the most important settings around
Yeah.
those?
Yeah, definitely. So discounts, sales tax, and fees are all very similar in the way that they're set up, in that the way that we sort of look at the information that's pulled into the order for discount, sales tax, and fees is we have you set it up as a line item. So it'll come through as an additional line item on every order if there's a discount, or obviously every order should have sales tax. But you just need to tell us what line item that is. So generally, similar to how we have like a standard customer, you'd create a discount line item, and that way we could just send any discounts that are in orders directly to that line item.
Yeah, so you
Uh,
have two options. You either create a discount item in your QuickBooks and you map it to whatever your discount income account it is. So all your sales come in as gross and then the adjustment to discounts. Or if you
mhm.
turn that off, then it just distributes the discount among all the individual line items. And then there's no separate discount line item, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, so for granularity, we generally recommend setting it up as a line item just because then you can, like you said, segment it. You can point it to whatever income account you want and then make sure you're tracking it. Sales tax kind of explains this even to a finer degree in that, every order is going to have sales tax on it. And depending on how you have your sales tax set up, either in QuickBooks or on your store, that information not might not match up, right? Like if you expect QuickBooks to do a recalculation based off of what's already been paid in Shopify, it's probably more often than not going to come out to the same number as if you maybe haven't done your homework on your jurisdictions or whatever. So, what we recommend for sales tax specifically, obviously your sales channel should always be collecting online sales tax. But when you do want to pull it in, do the same thing. Collect it as a line item, we'll pull it in, and then you can just point it to a sales tax line item inside of QuickBooks. That
Yeah.
way you can have all of your sales tax for each store pointed to wherever you need it.
So you're gonna create an individual sales tax item that goes into a sales tax payable liability account.
Hmm.
You're going to turn off your sales tax in QuickBooks and you're going to let Shopify manage the sales, oh, calculate the sales tax.
Yeah.
And then you can
Yeah.
get the
Shopify
report
should
of it.
calculate it anyways, right? Because
Correct.
the customer's already paying in most cases.
All right, very cool. And then the fees, these are what, the Shopify fees?
Yeah. So the Shopify payment or the posting payment fees. So you'll see it come through again, very similar setup. If you want it as a line item or a separate transaction, it's definitely gives you maybe a little bit more granularity if you want to pull it in separately. Um, and then same thing, give it a line item, and then you can specify your own the product service description and then set the expense account here as well. So a little bit more fidelity in this screen specifically.
This is for sure what I love about Webgility, especially compared to all the other similar products in the market, is that you get the I mean, right or wrong, you get the option, right? Do you
Hmm.
want to see the fee discounted from the order as a line item? That way, you always know, what customer or what transaction that fee is tied to, or do you want to leave the order intact because you want the overall amount of the order to match the, if you're going to search that or something,
Hmm.
or cross-reference it, and then you want the fee to come in as a completely separate transaction, you got the flexibility for that, and then that fee, gets built into the clearing account. So when the net amount gets into the bank, you see all the gross, all the fee, all hit the clearing account, and you have complete control on the flow on how all this stuff comes. So I like the fact that, I mean, all this control, you can also mess things up. And that's why, you have to have someone kind of walk you through it in the setup process. Like you said, you have your implementation team that
Hmm.
helps people set this up. But I like the control because as an accounting, sometimes there's a very quirky, specific way in which I want it because that's the
Yes.
flow I'm used to. And I like having that total control.
Yeah, I think I mean obviously gap exists for a reason. All things considered, like compliance is very important. But a lot of times the way that businesses run their accounting is different from business to business. Everybody does something different, I think, in their workflow, and I think we've tried to account for that in that you have all of those again levers and knobs that you can turn and pull to kind of get it to fit your specific workflow, I think.
Yeah. So the last thing we'll cover is the reports. Even though, like generally, I connect Webgility to any of my e-commerce clients, most of the reporting is going to happen in QuickBooks, especially when there's multi-channel, because I want to see the reports across all my channels, not a single channel.
Yeah.
But show me what Webgility has on the reporting side.
Yeah, so I'll start out with that dashboard. I'll go back to the dashboard just to show sort of the lightweight version of it all. Because sometimes maybe you just want to get a super, zoomed in glance of like your expenses or the amount of orders that you posted or the revenue specific to that store. This dashboard will kind of give you that first look at everything. You can filter it by, a couple different options here for dates. And this will look at your individual store, whichever one you're in. So right now we're on that first Shopify store. I can go to the second one and sort of switch up that view very easily. But like you said, you might want to see all of your stores together and get a more top-down view of profitability and how things are selling. We have an analytics tab that can show you on the sales end. It'll show you like more order detail data. Um, Take a second to load here, but it'll show you your gross sales, your average order value, the products that are performing well, and then from that you can sort of deduce what's maybe not performing well. So this gives you a little bit more of a zoomed in view on everything, not just the one specific store that you're looking at. It'll show you, what's performing well, what's not, and then we have a couple different reports. Look at today, month. There's a forecasting report that'll sort of look at trend data, see how it forecasts you for the rest of the year, and then month over month, year over year reporting as well. Again, this is more of the sales and the order reporting, and then you can go to the profitability tab and
Which
see.
to preface, it will require you to have your costs have
Correct,
to be built into the product so it can calculate the cost of sales. Because in this
correct.
particular case, it's not showing the cost.
Yeah, so you're
It's
missing, yeah,
yeah,
shipping fees, cost of goods sold, selling fees, stuff like that. But once you have all that in here, you get a little bit more of a clear picture on your net profits and where you're, maybe losing money on fees and stuff like that. So I know this information is available in QuickBooks as well, but having it all in the idea is that you can do everything from Webgility at some point, right? That you can kind of manage everything that you need to from one place or in as few places as possible.
that's great, John. And so we went over pretty much all the settings, all the different things you can change. We
Mhm.
won't go over automation, but there is another area where you go to automation, which is
Mhm.
basically where you pick and choose which of the settings that we talked about, you know, get done automatically versus the ones that you're gonna manually
And it's really
choose.
straightforward. You just
Yeah.
tell us, do you want to do it every night, every 15 minutes? And then what do you want us to sync? Do you want it to be orders? Do you want it to just be products? Which way do you want to sync it from? So that's where you set the master as either the sales channel or QuickBooks. And then do you want us to post refunds as well?
Okay.
So pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's great, man. So can we go into Webgility website just as a customer? So how do people get started? Like how do people like choose the version of Webgility they want? Kind of walk us through like, okay, somebody's watching this, they spend the whole hour watching this. They're like, I'm convinced, the QuickBooks built-in e-commerce thing doesn't work really well. I want to sync my channels with QuickBooks using Webgility. So when they go buy it, like how do they choose the right version? How much they're expecting to pay? Give us a rundown.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, good question. So when you go to our pricing page, you'll see a couple of different options here. We integrate with not only QBO but QBD and Zero as well. If you have questions like in the moment that maybe this pricing page doesn't lay out or answer for you enough, our chat's always available, really responsive. We have a whole team that's dedicated to it. It'll start you off with our AI chatbot, but it'll get you to the right people. But from a functionality standpoint, the basic is going to be more of that consolidated posting, right? It's going to be very straightforward, very scaled down usability. It's going to just give you what you need to get the information from one place to the other. And that's at 29 a month. We just lowered the price for our basic plan. Moving to the pro plan, though, it gives you more orders per year. And then it gives you access to the AI assistant with more granularity on pulling in those orders. So you get a little bit more functionality from the order standpoint. And then the advanced is going to be you get access to the B2B functionality, even more orders per year, and then you get those analytics as well.
So what you pay, because it looks like there's a number of orders per year. So you
Mhm.
it's set up to automate no matter how much volume you have, but the pricing changes basically based on the volume.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, the cap isn't, you don't like hit $9,600 a year or 9,600 orders a year and it stops working. We can just always add more orders to your plan super easily. So you could be on the basic plan and get more orders added to your plan if you need to.
Okay. And then you pay for implementation separately or implementation is included?
It is included with every plan. So whether you're on desktop or online, you'll get a an email to schedule an implementation session or multiple if it takes multiple with our implementation team. We'll go through. We'll make sure that it's one obviously connected to all of your sales channels in QuickBooks, and then from there we do some testing to pull in orders and post them. So a lot of times for QBO, we get it done in one session because it's a lot more straightforward. For QuickBooks Desktop, with how advanced inventory and stuff like that works, it can generally be a couple implementation sessions, but yeah, all included.
I know you can't speak about your competitors, but as a representative of your brand,
Mhm.
when you are talking to customers and they're saying, I'm also looking at A2X, I'm also looking at Cinder, I'm also looking at Bookkeep. I went to Google or ChatGPT and it told me that this app is good, this app is good. Like
Mhm.
when you say tell people, look, the reason why you want to go to Webgility is X. What is that reason?
I'd say two reasons. One is the difference in product is that you have that granularity, you have the flexibility. A lot of our competitors, it's only consolidated posting, it's only summary posting. They don't offer that fidelity that we talked about. The other thing is, I know I mentioned the customer onboarding. I think outside of even just onboarding, our customer service has sort of set us apart. Our team's really knowledgeable. Most of our CS team has been with Webgility for like 10 plus years. So really good support on our end, and that's what a lot of our customers speak to specifically.
That's awesome. Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. We're right at the top of the hour, wrapping up this webinar. The one thing I would add, John, is we did a video and webinar with Hector in his YouTube channel. That should be an advantage versus a competitor. So definitely check out Webgility if you have e-commerce and connected with QuickBooks and you want to automate everything. Like John said, they'll do the implementation. They'll help you through the implementation. That's a huge plus. And I'll put the contact information for Webgility in the slides that they're all downloadable. So you can, after you're watching this recording in YouTube or whatever, you can click on the link and you can get a copy of the slides. All the contact information should be there. And thank you very much, Webgility. And thank you very much. And we'll see you guys in the next webinar.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thank you, Hector. Appreciate you.